Hello. How's everybody going? I hate when I do that, when I say, how's it going and what's everybody doing? We are going to do a recording of the live variety here for Lore You Should Know.
Much more interesting than the dead variety.
The dead variety.
Or the undead variety.
Ask questions in groans and grunts. All right, so I think we're recording now, so we'll jump right into it. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another segment of Lore You Should Know, where we dive into little tidbits of Dungeons & Dragons lore and give them to you so that you can use them in your game or just because they're fun to know. I am Greg Tito, and I'm joined by the lore masters, Mr.
Chris Perkins.
And
Matt Cernett.
Yay! How are you guys doing?
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Today we're going to talk about Star Spawn, which gets into more detail when you will all be reading Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. We wanted to give you some tidbits about where Star Spawn came from and where they will be going, I guess. So where was the first time these were introduced?
Well, it's a little complicated.
It always is.
So, Starspawn appeared in, I think, Monster Manual 2 for 4th edition. And they were somewhat different than the ones that are being presented in Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. Those ones more closely resemble what were called Foul Spawn. And Foul Spawn was in the Monster Manual 1 in 4th edition, I think.
Yeah.
And
Foul Spawn?
Foul Spawn.
Yeah.
Okay.
One word. Yeah.
And so we, with 5th edition, we wanted to kind of blend the ideas and pull in some other elements, like there's references to elder evils with warlocks and so on. So we wanted to kind of tie it all up into a nice little bow, where it's a bit messy previously.
Yeah. I was mentioning this to you guys just before we went live, but D&D hasn't always had warlocks. Warlocks were a development that came toward the end of 3rd edition, and we've had them ever since.
Yeah.
At least formally written up as there were probably warlocks in old Dragon magazine articles now that I think back.
Who knows,
but they weren't really canonized in the core of the game until 3rd edition, and a number of people on staff at the time really dug them. And we're looking for ways to kind of tie them into the multiverse and looking at connections to elder evils, connections to other patrons, and the stars kind of emerged as this sort of leading concept that maybe that's where some warlocks get their power. And when you think about stars in D&D, maybe there's stuff that actually lives there, and they're called star spawn, or they're ejected from the stars and they end up on our planet. And so these are creatures born of the stars. We call them star spawn.
Interesting. Okay,
but there's also this weird tie into the far realm.
Right. So the foul spawn are kind of spawned by connections with the far realm, and the far realm sort of people who are cultists who want to open gateways to the far realm because they're crazy or whatever.
What's the far realm?
Oh,
what's the definition of that?
Well,
it is a plane that defies normal rules of physics and geometry. It's very much a Lovecraftian realm of non-Euclidean experiences where things that shall not be named dwell, and where if you were to peer through a window into it, you would go irrevocably insane.
Got it. All right. So
all in all, not a great adventuring location.
Yeah. Let's go there.
If you hear the Call of Cthulhu, that's where you'll be going to.
Exactly.
Yeah. Got it.
And folks like Bruce Cordell, who were huge Lovecraft fans, really they did more than dip their toes in. They took the plunge and really tried to bring the far realm out and over a course of a number of products in a very kind of mysterious and oblique way. And the foul spawn were sort of a natural outgrowth of that. Monsters from the far realm whose you don't really know what they want or why they want it. They just do, and you just take it.
Yeah. Sometimes they were transformed cultists somehow, or
they got tentacles coming out of their eyeballs. Or whatever.
And so and 4th edition kind of again like leaned into that idea, particularly in the Forgotten Realms, where then there was I'm forgetting the Abolithic sovereignty, which was connected to the Far Realm, and so both in the Forgotten Realms and in the sort of general D&D adventures, there are a whole bunch of products that featured foul spawn in various capacities. I wrote some.
Yep. In
I don't even remember.
in
doing
fourth
it.
edition, a number of stars were given names, and
Right.
like Zybon, Kyphon, Akamar, Hadar,
Yep, Hadar.
and a number of other ones. Articles were written about these stars and the influences that they have over people, and how one star is different from another. You know, Zybon is the corpse star, and it has this kind of property, and blah 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 blah. And that would translate into certain powers that warlocks had. Those powers, in some of them, became spells in 5th edition. Like we have Arms of Hadar, which is a spell in 5th edition. The name Hadar is there, and that came about in 4th edition. But this idea that there is magic that channels the powers of these stars in weird ways. Armor of Agathis is another one.
Yep.
Now, these stars, are they visible everywhere in the multiverse, or are they only in the Forgotten Realms? Or I love it when I stump you guys.
The answer is no. They're not visible everywhere, depending on how you view the cosmology.
Yeah.
see.
So there's a lot of previously there's been some amount of effort sort of to the idea of them being traveling or wandering stars, and so it comes through every once 1,000 years, or it just comes through at a certain time, and who knows why, and
kind of like comets, or things might portend great events on the material plane, but then bringing that idea to the
we're
multiverse.
certainly not binding them to any particular sort of sky or crystal sphere, or whatever you want to call it, in world of D&D.
But there is just a star somewhere in the multiverse that these entities like the star spawn live, or
and it could
exist.
show up anywhere. It's
Right.
Yeah. I mean, and whether or not like they are actually on that star, or if it's just sort of that star is kind of like a herald of their arrival, is sort of mysterious. I mean, there are certainly things that we call elder evils like Hadar and so on, that we don't believe reside in stars. So another one would be like Dendar the Night Serpent, who is an important one in Forgotten Realms history, and we don't believe that Dendar the Night Serpent lives in a star, or maybe even is associated with a star, but she still might have these sort of weird creatures,
cosmic connections.
Yeah,
I see.
Yeah. So
That's interesting. So
we decided not to pick up this. We haven't picked up the foul spawn per se yet with 5th edition, but we have taken the concept of star spawn and evolved it for Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, and they're not one kind of creature. They are a family of creatures, and they're generally weird, inscrutable monsters that when they show up, you probably just want to kill them. They're so aberrant that they don't fit in your cosmology the way like goblins do.
Right.
When you see them, it's very clear when you look at them. These are not of this world, and they want to eat us and destroy us. So we should probably destroy them first.
good plan.
What about something from a warlock perspective? Would they be using their power? Yeah. Like, oh, hey, I can do so much more now that I have you nearby.
I think with sort of the that kind of pact that's with like the elder evils and stuff like that, you're trying to use the power of these beings, probably without even garnering their notice.
You're like siphoning off.
Yeah, you're just trying to steal a little bit and hope they don't show up.
Is that what the casting of the spells that you mentioned is kind of doing in a way?
Yeah, in a way. But I think it's open to interpretation. A lot of times you just cast the spell and you don't really care what the long-term consequences, or if any consequences are of that spell. And we don't say in the spell, if you cast the spell 100 times, Hadar is going to show up and go, "Hey, buddy, what you doing?"
Out of his tentacle eye.
Right, exactly.
But that'd be kind of an interesting thing to do, though.
It would. And a lot of people I've heard anecdotally in trying to bring their warlocks to life and make the patrons sort of a meaningful part of the warlock story have had these entities show up as a consequence of the warlock tapping into this power. And I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah, especially if they did too much too often.
Right, or not
something.
enough.
Oh, yeah, that's true, too. Like, you're not using our power enough. What's wrong with you? You haven't called me.
You have the power of a star, and you're just...
Yeah, and Avar's like, hey, what's up?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, cool. And there's a lot of these amazing monsters coming in Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes.
There is a collection of them, yes.
Yeah, and they all tend to be higher challenges for higher levels creatures. Is that correct?
Let's see. They are, mid to high.
Mid to high.
Yeah.
So definitely something that you would only want to throw in if it was meaningful, I think, right? Not just as a throwaway goblin fight in level 1.
Well, you could. There's one that's really low, and then
Yeah.
I think that's the DM giving you a hint.
Yes.
Something weird's going to happen later on.
I think there, in adventures where creatures like this have been used in the past, there's almost always some sort of cosmic event associated with them. Like, for instance, the Chaos Scar Adventures, 4th edition that we published in Dungeon Magazine, is this idea of a comet crashes into the ground, kaboom, makes a big mess, and things start to gravitate around it or come out of it or whatever. And a lot of those things could be weird-ass stuff like this.
Makes sense.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I can't wait to delve into more of these when Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes comes out, May 28th, 29th, and then 18th in game stores. Good stuff. Where
right.
can people get in touch with you to ask you more questions about lore?
I can be reached on Twitter at Chris Perkins DND.
I'm also on Twitter at Cernett, SERNETT.
Sweet. All right. Thank you, guys. We will be back with another segment next week. Thank you very much. Easy peasy.
Next.
Meh. You want to talk about Giff?
Sure.
I have to accentuate the because the Giff.
This one will go fast, I reckon.
You never know.
Yeah.
Oh ho.
Matt's got like 40 pages to talk about.
Yeah. I'm happy to let Matt go off on this. They are one of my all-time favorite creatures.
They are?
They are.
But you don't have much to say about them. It's so sad.
Well,
We'll see.
Okay.
I'll save it for the camera.
Dun, dun, dun. Hello, and welcome to another segment of Lore You Should Know, where we delve into little bits of Dungeons & Dragons lore and find out what makes them tick and how you could get them in your game, possibly. I'm Greg Tito, and I'm joined by...
Chris Perkins.
And...
Matt Cernett.
Sorry, I just spit across the table.
That's just like a gift would. For today, we are going to talk about a human-hippo hybrid with a musket.
It's a blunderbuss.
Blunderbuss,
Thank you.
sorry. That's why you guys are here to correct me. The Giff, Giff.
Yes.
Giff.
Not pronounced Giff.
Right. Correct.
It is definitely
GIF.
All right, good to know.
And that name's been around longer than the whole GIF argument, so we can't be held accountable.
Before JPEGs were even a thing.
That's right.
It's true.
Yes.
So what are these Giff?
Spacefaring hippo folk.
Spacefaring hippo folk.
Space
Yes.
hippos.
Space hippos. Hippos in space.
This was totally a Muppets reference, wasn't it?
Totally, yes. So there was this thing called Spelljammer.
Yes.
This wonderful, glorious thing.
For those who don't know, it is one of the campaign settings that came out of...
Best.
One of the best? The best?
One of the best campaign settings.
Are we going to put our flag down on this? It is simply the best campaign setting ever produced by TSR for the D&D game.
That's canon for everyone.
And it was basically D&D in space. Now, it's not like Space Helmets in 2001 kind of space. It's got its own D&D feel and flair. But one of the things that it does have is a lot of its own weird monsters. It kind of took the stick an animal head on a human idea and went to all kinds of different planets with it.
Yes. Very, very strange places.
So that's where you got
and the GIF got traction, I think, largely because of the way that they were presented in art.
Yeah.
And the way that they were presented in art, and the way they're presented in art in Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, is a GIF dressed in what is essentially a military uniform.
Yeah.
Carrying a big-ass firearm.
Don't forget the monocle.
and very, very important, the monocle.
The
in
monocle.
The eye.
That is very important. It evokes like a little bit of like Mr. Monopoly feel to it.
It was basically D&D going all camp, and I think that's part of the charm. Is you have these big, hulking guys with guns and hippo heads running around pretending they're basically a militia.
Yeah. And so the Giff were all over Spelljammer products. I mean, they appeared in pretty much everything. Oddly enough, they didn't appear in Realm Space, but they did appear in Kryn Space and Gray Space. I don't know why.
So just to recap here, Realm Space is the area of like the solar system around the Forgotten Realms planets.
In Spelljammer, every solar system that has one of these important settings, like Forgotten Realms, is encased in what's called a crystal sphere. And then outside of that crystal sphere is what's called a phlogiston.
Yeah.
And that separates these crystal spheres. So Kryn space is the space that Dragonlance is in. It's got its own solar system, its own planets besides Kryn.
Yeah.
And Gray space is Greyhawk. Realm space is the Forgotten Realms. And those were different products of
the Spelljammer line.
Spelljammer line, yes.
Got it.
And that is where we learn that the face of the moon in the Forgotten Realms is a vast illusion, and it's actually populated by people.
That's right, which we have discussed in many a lore segment in the past. So who were the Giff? What area were they in?
So the Giff don't have a home planet in Spelljammer.
What?
They are a wandering race of mercenary hippo people who love war and fighting and explosions and gunpowder.
Okay.
Yeah, they've got they're D&D's first ammosexuals.
They're only attracted to ammunition.
I did not expect that, and when it came out of your mouth, I was like, "That is perfect. That is divine."
If you learn one thing during this segment, learn that.
Because that's basic. As Matt said, they just love to shoot their guns, and they love gunpowder. And actually, it's a thing for them. One of the drives of them is when they run out of gunpowder, they've got to go find more, and that's sort of what pushes them along their quest for more guns and more gunpowder.
We can't be a good mercenary band unless we have guns and gunpowder. So let's continue.
And I'm not going to use it. I got big hippo hands. It's just like
It's barely worth the gun. I don't even know.
And there's sort of a weird thing where they don't have wizards, and they don't have other types of spellcasters and stuff like that. And so this is their thing, and it's just like it's almost like a sort of really goofy take on the Klingons, where
there's an honor system.
There's an honor system. There's ranks. They're a warrior culture and that kind of a thing, but with monocles and vests.
Yeah, the artwork almost looks like they're like colonial Englishmen, like constantly trying to be at war.
And they don't really colonize things though. They just work for others, and and they I think they have some prohibition against fighting each other, but beyond that, they just go out there and try and earn more of the gunpowder or smoke powder or whatever you want to call it that they can use to make more guns to be more awesome. And
are they solitary? Do they travel in herds? Do they travel in herds of ships?
Yeah, they basically travel in war bands, and the war bands help to crew other Spelljammer vessels.
Right, and within their band, they've got a military hierarchy. So, and the main Giff might call himself general, or he might call himself a colonel or a major or whatever he wants. And then there's a lineup of others behind him. But being a warrior culture, the one who's got the reputation for being the baddest and the most glory is the one who's kind of leading the way.
Do they have their own ships? Do they travel on their own, or they're only on someone else's time?
One of the things about Spelljammer is that in order to spelljam, in order to use these ships in space and travel around, you have to be able to use a Spelljammer helm, and the use of a Spelljammer helm requires you to be a spellcaster.
I see.
So there has to be a pilot who can actually do the sailing around, and they don't have anybody who can do that.
That's interesting that they're at the whims of other folks who can master the arcana arts there. So that's why they became what they are.
Yeah,
I like that.
Yep.
They pop up in the weirdest places. So there's there was I should say because it's been 100 years or whatever, but in Skullport there was a Giff named the Brigadier who lived in or ran a pub named the Broadside. So there's that.
So beneath the city of Waterdeep, there is a Giff with his own bar.
there's a mercenary company that's been popped up in a few products in Forgotten Realms called the Mindolgulfs. I don't know why they're called that terrible name, but they have Wemix, Centaurs, Giff, Gripply, Kenku, Thrycreen, and other specialized monsters in their mercenary company. There's the first. So this isn't Forgotten Realms. This is the D&D First Quest adventure book. Has a Captain Blotimus.
Blotimus the hippopotamus. Got it. Okay.
Yes. And he is a NPC that you meet in that adventure. And let's see, there's the Forgotten Realms novel Finder's Bane has there was a Giff who was basically the first mate of some ship, and they stripped off his skin and used him as a figurehead until his heart finally let go.
Good Lord.
Poor little Giff guy. That's upsetting.
I'm laughing because it's funny to me.
I used Giff in a dungeon adventure once. In Dungeon 74, the adventure called Scourge of Scalabar, where a submarine captain had 2 Giff lieutenants.
Oh, that makes sense.
Named Mr. Quee and Mr. Queg.
I recall that, yes.
Were they related?
Yes.
So, and then another weird place I found them popping up was the Zakara campaign setting, which I don't think we've talked about much. But there's one that popped up there that was selling wheel-lock pistols to some Zakarans.
Nothing says Al-Qadim, like a giant hippo man with wheel-lock pistols.
with a monocle. Now, I mean, how could these be used now in 5th edition? Like, how would you? I mean, obviously,
straight up no chaser.
Just throw it in there. As an NPC.
They literally are. I think the best way to use them is you're sitting in a tavern and suddenly the door gets kicked in and some Giff are there.
Yeah. I did exactly that in my D&D campaign when I was in high school, and literally the players left the table.
Oh my God!
They were like, "What? No."
Hippos with guns. Get out of here.
Yes.
Yeah.
I know there are some individuals who won't allow guns in their campaign, in which case Giff definitely feel out of place.
Yeah.
But if your game can withstand flintlocks, then these guys are just a great surprise. And the fact that they're mercenary, I believe lawful neutral is their alignment.
I think so. I'll double check.
Means that even if they've been sent against you,
right,
they're not.
Correct.
You might be able to persuade them either through some honor, something to do with their honor or whatever, to join your side instead. In which case, it never hurts to have a bunch of giant hippo men mercenaries
in your back pocket
with blunderbusses in your back pocket.
Yeah. So I was going to bring up
more of the good stuff.
I was going to bring up the whole gunpowder and how you might introduce it into your campaign. Would this be a way to do that as well, if you were so inclined?
Absolutely. Particularly if like the Giff bring it with them, then it's sort of coming at the campaign externally. You don't have to come up with an internal logic for why the gunpowder hasn't been around and affecting your society. Now, different worlds have different rules when it comes to gunpowder. So Matt can talk a little bit about this, but Forgotten Realms has its own kind of magical gunpowder called smoke powder. Slightly different, functionally similar, but slightly different in terms of how it behaves in the world.
Yeah. I mean, it's a weird sort of wrinkle in Forgotten Realms canon where it's had both gunpowder and smoke powder, but the idea behind smoke powder was that, you can't just mix up gunpowder.
It's not an alchemical thing.
Yeah,
it's a magical substance.
It's a magical substance that you have to create, and so it's still something that's the purview of people who are like wizards and so on. And another weird thing about smoke powder was that just agitation and contact with air could set it alight. So if you open up that barrel of smoke powder and shake it around, and then it might explode. As opposed to normally gunpowder is pretty inert if you don't.
Yeah, if you introduce a flame to it or something like that, right?
Yeah.
There's also, I don't know, I just thought of this, but it'd be really, if you didn't want to have gunpowder or smoke powder in your campaign, it's a Giff that is stranded and is out of it. What does that character do?
Oh, he must be so sad.
Must be so sad, right? Poor guy.
Monocle just covered in tears.
Can't stay there because it just keeps falling out from all the tears.
Yeah. No Giff actually needs the monocle, by the way.
It's just an affectation.
Yeah, it's total affectation.
Yeah. Great. Well, I can't wait for more people to get a look at this art, as well as the monster stat block for it that's in Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. Definitely is fun. You can tell just from looking at the art, it feels like a Babar character. Would fit right in with the children's kind of fanciful story, and I think that's part of its charm.
Just imagine Babar with guns, and you're good.
Yeah, pretty much all the characters in there. Yeah, there is like a hippo in there somewhere, right? In Babar, so we're halfway there. Cool. Any other tidbits about the Giff you want to throw out there? All right. How can people get in touch with you to ask you exhaustive questions about Giff and where they come from?
Don't. I've told you all I know. I can be reached at Chris Perkins DND on Twitter.
I am also on Twitter at Sernett, Sernett.
Awesome. Great. Well, can't wait for all this to come out. As I said, with Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, May 29th, everywhere, but in game stores, May 18th. Look for it then. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Archdevils!
Wow, we did it. We can actually do 3 segments, and this will be nice.
Totally can.
All right. Cool. So, we ready?
Archdevils of Rivendell. Let's go.
Rivendell. It's
I just started watching Riverdale.
it's kind of good, isn't it?
I like it.
Yeah, it's got that whole dark feel to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Plus, it's got Dylan's.
It's the 90210 we deserve. All right.
Ready? And that was us filling time for waiting for that. Welcome to another segment of Lore You Should Know. I am Greg Tito, and this is the segment where we delve into Dungeons & Dragons lore to give you stuff you might be able to use in your game, or just because it's super interesting and these guys know a lot about it. I am joined by Mr. Chris Perkins.
Thank you.
And Matt Sernett.
Howdy.
And we are going to talk about Archdevils today. We talked a little bit about the 9 hells in a previous Lore You Should Know segment, but this we'll talk about the devils themselves and how devilish
And
they are.
what archdevilness means.
Exactly. Yeah. So what does an archdevil mean?
An archdevil, as opposed to just a normal devil, is the ruler of a layer of the 9 hells. So at any given time, there are 9 of them, unless there's some weird case where an archdevil actually rules more than one layer. In which case, there may be less than 9 of them.
And there have been some occasions in which 2 devils have sort of
shared
jointly ruled.
Yes.
So
I see. What if someone added a layer and there was like 10 layers of hell?
there are no added layers in hell.
Yeah.
9.
9.
11?
No.
Nope.
Okay. And those are all ruled by Asmodeus, correct?
So Asmodeus is the overlord of the 9 hells. He is the lord of the 9, the greatest of all the archdevils, and the only one among them who these days can count himself as a god.
Has he always been in charge?
As long as we have delved into the 9 hells, yes.
Interesting. When were the 9 hells or archdevils first kind of talked about?
The Monster Manual, first edition. So the very first Monster Manual, there they were.
All 9 of them named?
Were all 9 of them in there? Let's see. There was Asmodeus in the original.
Didn't
we didn't.
Didn't we have Mephistopheles? No, we did.
We didn't have him in the original Monster Manual. We had Asmodeus, Dissipator, Balzibul, and Garyon. One of the oldies who's currently not a ruler of one of the layers of the 9 hells. And then over time, some others were introduced. Mammon came in Monster Manual 2, as did Moloch and Mephistopheles. So we saved the M's for some reason.
Just get them all out there.
Yep. So they were kind of rolled out. And
a lot of those are common to kind of like the Christian myths
Yes.
of demons, right?
Yes.
Those
And,
names all
devils.
Devils, yes. I'm
yeah.
sorry.
And there's a lot of sort of in not only in the names but in the presentation of the devils, there are some heavy Christian undertones.
Yeah, and D&D with its mythology of gods and devils and demons and so on and so forth has borrowed heavily from Christianity and sort of sort of weird occult sort of things they're sort of Christian or sort of kind of related. I mean, not necessarily recognized by Christianity, but it's kind of Christian adjacent.
Yeah.
Yes. And then also similar things with other cultures, and so you'll find deities and creatures and monsters and so on in Dungeons and Dragons that are named after real world deities and pantheistic societies, because it just sort of plundered all of those for.
Yeah, it's using myth as a source.
And what D&D, what the early editions tried to do is make sure that these devils had interesting looks to them, so that they wouldn't all just be, horned guys. Asmodeus looks like an impeccably dressed, handsome older guy, beard, little horns. But then you put him next to Balzabul, who in the first edition Monster Manual basically had a fly head, and Garyon, who had a big serpentine body. But flies and serpents are definitely sort of embedded in the lore of devils in real world myth society.
Right.
So
Balzabul was the Lord of the Flies, right?
Yes, exactly.
If I know my William Golding.
Exactly. And so some of them look more like a traditional devil as we imagine them than others. Some of them look weirdly monstrous, but all of them are kind of scary. But the important thing is Asmodeus is the main archdevil.
Yeah.
And he decides who rules which layers of hell. And if an archdevil on another layer is not living up to expectations, Asmodeus can basically connive or dethrone that archdevil and install a new one. And over the course of editions, we have either at times probably unconsciously and at other times consciously switched those out to suggest or indicate the idea that the hells are not static. And because of all the political backstabbing that comes with being a devil and a lawful evil individual, that there have been changes over time, that old archdevils have fallen out of favor or been pushed out by their rivals and had new people elevated up in their place.
Interesting.
Yeah, and one of the weird things about that kind of change that's been made in who's on top when of which layer is that those changes were often made independent of other products that came out at the time. And so, when so-and-so fell and so-and-so was elevated in sort of the timeline of the various worlds of D&D is really fuzzy. It's just sort of...
Some are a little bit easier to peg than others because there were some product to buttress it. Like when... in second edition, there was a product called A Paladin in Hell, and that ends with a showdown with Garyon, the ruler then of the fifth layer of Hell. Yeah. And it's sort of assumed that when that adventure concludes, Garyon is out.
Okay.
That event was sort of precipitated his exit and fall from Asmodeus' favor.
But he still exists?
He's still alive. A devil can get just pushed out politically.
Right.
A devil that dies on a plane other than its own doesn't truly die. It reforms back in the Nine Hells. A devil that dies in the Nine Hells can still come back, usually as a lower order devil that then has to work its way back up through the diabolical hierarchy to achieve any status to re-achieve any status it lost.
I love that diabolical is an actual adjective about
yes, it is
them.
an actual adjective.
No.
Yeah, but it makes sense in this context.
Yes, exactly. Not just that they're jerks.
And in other cases, we don't really know what happened, as Matt said, to cause the change.
Okay.
Like between editions, often these changes happen. The Lord of the sixth layer of Hell has changed a number of times. It was once in Planescape, the Hag Countess was the
Archdevil in charge of that.
Archdevil, but then with I think fourth edition, that was replaced by Asmodeus' daughter Glazia, and she became and still is the Archdevil of that layer.
And so all of the now leaders of each layer, they're in. Many of them are in Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, statted up to be able to be used.
A few of them.
Yes,
interesting.
a few. Not all of them.
Not all of them.
Not each of the 9 layers. But I know at least Moloch is in there.
Moloch is definitely in there.
Moloch's an interesting character.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about each one of these if we can. Yeah.
So Moloch is a name that's used a lot in a lot of the older products, and it wasn't really, I think, until very recently that we figured out that there's a connection between Moloch and the original, or the first edition, was it Player's Handbook or the DMG? Player's Handbook. Yeah. Where the sort of creature, or there's a statue of something on the cover of that book, and the adventurers are prying the gem out of the
the very famous
I love that
first edition Player's Handbook cover.
It wasn't until very recently that we sort of figured out, like, that's probably Moloch because of various other depictions of Moloch that had happened earlier on.
Oh, it's a statue to him.
Yeah.
When you look at that illustration, and you look at the black and white illo rendered of him in the first edition Monster Manual 2, there is a definite likeness.
And it looks like they're in a cultist, area. It's not definitely a holy in any way. So,
and I have a vague recollection that somebody actually tracked down someone who was familiar with the art process.
Yeah. So, without going too far down this rabbit hole, that cover. This is all third-hand information coming. So,
believe it at your peril.
Right. Yes. But apparently, it wasn't the cover that Gary wanted or expected for the Player's Handbook. And when it arrived, he was somewhat surprised. But the artist would apparently referred to it as Molly, the actual statue.
Oh.
And so Molly, Moloch.
There's a connection there.
So if that story is true, then that sort of helps kind of cement that.
Nice. So we're like triangulating that information, but it's like, all right, we're like 95% sure that is what Moloch looks like.
Yeah, but there are some conflicting thoughts about that as well. So it may in fact be proven ultimately false. But when you do look at the illustration of the Monster Manual 2 and you compare it to the of Moloch in Monster Manual 2 and you compare it to the illustration on the cover of the Player's Handbook, you start to see certain similarities.
Now, what kind of a archdevil was Moloch? What was his character like?
He was kind of a bruiser, wasn't he?
Yeah, he's a beefcake. But
always working out.
He was exiled, so he's one of those ones that it's sort of looking for a return. There are other devils out there, that archdevils that or previous archdevils that are characters that are looking to return to hell. Gargoth is another one, and I think Garyon is as well at this point.
Yeah,
because he was thrown out, but now he's trying to get back.
Yeah.
Yes,
interesting. Or thrown out at least as being an archdevil, but he was always still there. What about Mephistopheles? What is that character?
So
like?
Mephistopheles is the archdevil of the 8th layer of hell, called Cania. And he is probably, of all the archdevils, the one closest to Asmodeus in power. And he and Asmodeus have had a prickly relationship, but I think it holds the old aphorism, you keep your enemies close, is exactly why Mephistopheles has never been dethroned or cast out by Asmodeus from his stronghold on the icy layer in which he lives.
Yeah, and I just wanted to bring up that one of the things we try to do with Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes is give each of the archdevils who rules a layer sort of their own shtick. They do have some of that in previous lore, but a lot of the previous lore is often based upon the sort of political struggle and who's on top when and all that kind of stuff, rather than saying, okay, this archdevil wants this, and this is how they go about getting it. So Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, you can look forward to sort of learning what the motivations are behind these archdevils like Mephistopheles and so on, because then you learn basically, okay, here's why not only would you like to make a deal with Mephistopheles, but why he'd like to make a deal with you. This is the kind of deal that Mephistopheles makes. This is the kind of deal that Zariel makes. These are the kinds of people that the sort of souls they're trying to entice into hell, because that way they kind of get this soul direct, as opposed to sort of what typically happens, which is if you're lawful evil and you haven't been particularly beholden to any particular god or devil or whatever, you end up emerging from the river Styx, which wipes all your memory, and you come out as a lemure, the lowest version of devil. And if you want to get anywhere in hell, you have to sort of work your way up the hierarchy from being a measly little lemure.
How does that usually happen as far as working your way up? Does it come just from stabbing the person that's ahead of you, or getting more souls to sign contracts?
Yes.
So Avernus is the first layer of hell, and one of the things about hell is that you typically can't get from layer to layer without going through each layer. So if you want to get to the third layer, you got to go through the second, and you have to sort of that kind of thing. If you want to get higher in your ranking, you have to go through the various steps of evolution, let's say, from one to the next. Yeah. And I would imagine that most lemures need to just do a really good job following the orders of anybody around them who gives them orders of higher ranking, and maybe at some point somebody notices that they aren't terrible. But I mean, I imagine most lemures just spend really long time.
Yeah. I think when you're a lemure, really, it's just odds. Are you in the right place at the right time when you get promoted? Because what happens is Archdevil, Asmodeus can promote anybody to be a ruler of a layer of hell, and they become an Archdevil. An Archdevil has the power to elevate any devil underneath them up. And sometimes when devils get thinned out, they just have to bring in more souls, make lemures out of them, and then elevate those lemures to fill in the ranks that have been depleted in the blood war or whatever other conflicts happen. So if you just happen to be the lemure that gets the finger pointed at you and then bamf, you are now whatever the next step up, imp. Okay, now you're an imp. You can actually think and have a conversation with people and connive and plot and stab people with your stinger in the neck and do all kinds of funny things to elevate yourself. Now you're on sort of a path progression up toward becoming higher and higher rank until finally you are a pit fiend waiting for somebody to piss Asmodeus off so that Asmodeus can point at you and go, you are now the ruler of this layer of hell. It's a long journey. Sometimes it lasts many, many lifetimes to get from lemure to pit fiend.
Yeah.
Most people don't make it.
Most souls don't even.
Yeah, and one of the great things about the Blood War is that if you happen to be one of those lemures or one of those other things, and the demons invade and they kill you, you cease to exist. So
that's good.
Chances of your ascending up the ranks at that point, very slim.
Wait, but I thought if devils perish on their plane, they could reform, but that's not true for lemures?
Well, if a devil dies on the nine hells, it's pretty much kaput.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, other planes they turn into
lemures rarely get sent to the material plane except by accident.
They get turned into goo in the case of devils, or a cloud of smoke or flies or whatever, and then they sort of reform back in hell. But in hell, a devil, if it's killed, it's done.
The other interesting thing about archdevils is that they're highly intelligent and civilized, unlike demon lords who are crass, horrible, monstrous, depraved,
and mad.
Mostly. Yeah, usually completely insane. Devils at that level are playing political games that make the politics of any material plane world seem tame by comparison.
Right.
And they're dealing with one another, and they're dealing with mortals, and they've got courts. They've got military advisors, they've got vassals, they've got courtiers, they've got succubi and incubi to entertain them. They've got huge numbers of people toadying up to them to be the next person chosen to be their consort or companion or general or whatever.
Yeah.
So they've all got their palaces and their courts surrounding them. So when you go to an archdevil, you're not just encountering the archdevil. You're encountering their entire spectrum, their entire court, and having to deal with that.
Are all of them as opulent as you're describing?
It varies.
It really does. It's really strongly tied to personality.
To each one, right?
And so that what that means for sort of adventures and so on, that where you're dealing with devils or you're going to hell and that kind of a thing, is that it won't always be as simple as, give me your soul and I'll give you power. It sometimes they'll just make a deal with you because it's convenient for them. So maybe you do make a deal with the devil and get away scot-free, right? You get the
At least
money.
the first time.
Yeah, and it works out. And, well, now we've got a working relationship here.
Right.
I can make a follow-up deal that might not be as good for
Now
you.
that we've established trust, let's talk about our mutual futures.
Yeah.
The other thing, too, is
Have you heard about Amway?
Archdevils are very busy, so they have vassals to basically serve as intermediaries. So if you go to the Iron City of Dis, you're not just going to be able to talk to Dispater. You're going to have to talk to the bureaucracy,
Right.
and penetrate that before you even get anywhere near the Archdevil.
And that's more hellish than anything
Yes.
we've been talking about so
Yes.
far.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, guys. That's a lot. There's a lot more information in Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes,
Yes, there is.
which comes out May 29th everywhere and May 18th in your local game store. You can get more there. But in the meantime, if people want to ask you questions about which Archdevil is your favorite, where can they ask you?
I'm on Twitter at Chris Perkins DND.
Also on Twitter at Cernett, SERNETT.
And I am at Greg Tito, but I don't know anything about Archdevils, so don't bother me there. I will be back with another segment in next week. So thank you very much, everybody. Bye-bye. And that's if I can get back on the Twitches, if we're still back on there. All right, they can hear me. Okay, good. Hi! We will be coming back very soon with Mordenkainen's Mayhem. There are no Archdevils in this competition, but it does feature Ari Levitch and Kate Welch knocking each other in the Underdark Undead realm of things. So it should be lots of fun. We're going to turn over this space right now and get it ready for that. Maybe up in a couple of minutes past that. But in the meantime, please enjoy this recap of last week's Mordenkainen's Mayhem, which we are going to play for your viewing pleasure right about now. And if there is time, perhaps we'll also show you the recap from week 1 as well. So go ahead and roll the thing, Pelham. And thank you guys so much for being around for the live recording of Dragon Talk. We'll be back potentially next week. We might have some updates on there, so follow me on Twitter and let me know about that. We may end up canceling next week's live recording and jump right back in the week after that. But we'll let you guys know. All right. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Welcome to the first battle in Mordenkainen's Mayhem. To help